Welcome to Funnel Reboot, the podcast that shares ideas on how to upgrade your lead generation. Here is your host, Glenn Schmeltzley.
Hey, Glenn here. Thanks for coming to hear about how we can upgrade our lead generation. Today, we're talking about the 7th book in a whole series we're doing on summer marketing books. This one has a unique outlook on the meaning of a marketing advantage. But before we get there, let me first remind you that you can catch up on the series or listen to future episodes by subscribing. And you can do that by going wherever you listen to audio and searching for Funnel Reboot. Also, if you've got suggestions for this or future books that we want to cover, please, anywhere on social media, we're at Funnel Reboot. I have a question for you today, especially if you're a career marketer. Have you ever had sales tell you that a deal was lost even though you have a superior product? Have you ever seen positioning statements listed on your website or in your ads twisted by your competitors, exploiting some kind of weakness of yours? Have you faced a rival brand undercutting your pricing to grab market share from you? It's maddening when this happens, but the truth is, marketers don't get participation ribbons. And each of these things, though they may be unfair, there are also situations where you could have grabbed the upper hand and reaped the benefit over your competitor. That's the premise of the book Unfair Marketing, which came out in 2021. The author of this book is also the founder of 3Q Digital, an agency that has over 350 digital marketers doing advertising, analytics, decision science, strategic consulting, as well as creative and CRO. And many of 3Q's clients are in Silicon Valley, which is where they are based. You would no doubt know the names of the companies they serve. So let's listen to the outlook that our guest has on unfair marketing. We're going to hear from David Rodnitsky. Before we get there, I have to apologize. We had a couple of glitches while we were recording, and the flow might be a little bit unusual, but we certainly have a lot for David to tell us. Let's go to our guest. David, I'm so glad to have you. You've talked about in this book the unfair advantages that you get, and the ones that come to mind, brand and money. These are always there, but I think you start the book off with a very overlooked source, and it's data. And just tell me a little bit about how you see data as a lever and, why you devote so much of the book to it. And I know you even gave us homework in the book on what we need to do to get going with that. Tell me more.
Yeah, I do spend about 40% of the book on data. So it's the first chapter. It's the most important chapter. And, I've been trained as a direct response or performance marketer, specifically in search engine marketing. And so what I've seen over the years is I've seen that companies that really get their data game to a high level have a huge advantage, regardless of how big the competition is. And to give you a simple example, let's say that I'm buying the word blue widgets and I have competition that's doing the same, also buying the word blue widgets. Maybe they're a much bigger company than I am. And it costs 50 cents to buy that click. And I have all this data, and the data shows that people who are in the United States are worth $5 a click versus people in Canada who are worth 10 cents a click. And people who are on iPhones are worth $1 a click, and people on Android phones are worth 15 cents a click. And people who click on a Monday morning are worth 5 times as much on a Sunday morning. Now, if I look at the average of all of my clicks, I find that they're actually only worth 40 cents of revenue. So again, I said I was paying 50 cents, so I'm losing 10 cents on average. But when I slice and dice this data, suddenly I have some pockets of my campaigns that are making me 10 times the cost per click, $5. So what do? I go in and I stop bidding on all of the junky, no offense to these people, but they're not buying from me. So in my mind, they're junky. I stop bidding on all the junky clicks, and I double or triple my spend on the great clicks. Now, my competitor, who only has the average return on investment for that click, who hasn't done any of this granular data work, only knows that they're losing 10 cents on every click. So they just stop buying ads, and they see me continually buying, and they're like, what is going on? How is this guy spending more and more money on this click when it's not working for me? This is an example of where data granularity and connecting all your data sources is literally the difference between buying a profitable marketing campaign and stopping your advertising altogether. And so, as you mentioned, the book goes through sort of an entire process of how you create a data advantage. And the first thing is just figuring out all the different sources that can give you a data advantage. A lot of times with online marketing, people look at their data from Google and Facebook, from their campaigns. They might look at web analytics, and then they kind of stop there. But the truth is, there are a multitude of sources that, if you can aggregate them, are going to give you a huge advantage. You can look at your call center information. You can look at your marketing automation. You can look at your CRM. You can look at your point of sale. You can look at your ERP. I'm forgetting some, but I go down the list of all the different sources you can look at. And if you can imagine, if you start putting these things together, every time you're able to find one of these sources and connect one of these sources and then put them into some sort of dashboard in a normalized sense where you can be actionable, that example I gave about the blue widgets becomes stronger and stronger because you just become more and more granular, and you're suddenly able to sort of see things that your competition just can't see.
Right. And you're going to take actions that they'll never take because you saw it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. So we look kind of at that first party data, and it probably takes some work to get that all together. You say that it even has a stronger advantage than, let's say, outside sources where you could be buying, audience impression numbers and reach. This is normally more in B2C, but it's all out there and people pay good money for it. And they also look at places like Google Ads and their Facebook ads. What's the cautionary note you want to hit with those outside sources of data?
I would say a couple things. Firstly, often it's the case that outside data costs you money to buy. If you're talking about a third-party data source, you're paying money for that. So if you can get that into your own systems for free, you've just made your marketing more profitable. You have more money to spend on your bids and less money to spend on the infrastructure. Second thing is sometimes that data is not accurate. If you have the data, you have a higher confidence that it's going to be accurate. I remember back in the day there was a third party data source that I used. And they said it was was super granular. It was like people looking to buy a used Volkswagen in the next 60 days. And I would buy these data sources from them. And I was like, well, I'm selling used Volkswagens. I'm going to get 100% click-through rate and 100% conversion rate. And it would be like, 0.01 click-through rate and 0.01 conversion rate. So something's wrong there. Something about their data was wrong. And that's just an example where you can't always rely on someone else that, even if it seems very granular.
The one I have to laugh at, and we can all do it, is you can go into Google and look into your own settings and see what they think you need to be advertised to on.
Yes, right.
Some of them are so far off.
Yes, absolutely. No, they're just, you're right. I've had just polar opposite of what I'm searching for. I don't know how they came to that conclusion. Now, the other thing about Google, you mentioned Google. Google is Google, Facebook, Apple. These are second party sources. So they're not sort of buying the data from someone else. They're collecting the data and then they're letting you use it. But as we know, all of these publishers or platforms, I should say, are considering removing the ability to use third-party data in your advertising and to limit the second-party data that they provide themselves. So if you are dependent right now on second-party and third-party data to make smart decisions about your marketing campaigns, in the next, say, 18 to 24 months, a lot of that data will go away. So it's a good time to start collecting that data, first-party data today, so that you're ready for a future where your data sources are going to be more limited.
Yeah. As you get into larger companies, the amount of data that you have is immense. But you say that there's kind of a problem or a sin that people can commit where they can either, not look too far into the data or read too much out of the data. So you took me back to my, college stats class when you talked about statistical significance. So can you kind of explain the double-edged sword that it plays?
Yeah. And I mean, I'm not a statistician, so I won't do a good job of explaining statistical significance, except to say that it is a indicator, and there are plenty of online tools that will help you determine this. A statistical indicator of the likelihood that you have confidence that the data is accurate. Um, and it's important because I really recommend that people keep drilling deeper and deeper into the data and getting more and more granular. So the example I gave before, people in a zip code in Illinois using an iPhone at 9 a.m. on a Monday on Facebook, if you can get there, you should get there because that gives you an advantage. The challenge or the problem is if you go too deep and the statistical significance is not there, then you end up getting false positives and false negatives. So if you had one person in a zip code who, for whatever reason, happened to spend $1 million after clicking on one of your ads, and your ROI was 400,000%, and you use that one instance to go and completely double down on that term and assume that every single person who converts from that zip code is going to be like that person, you would probably lose a lot of money because it was really just an anomaly. So that's where the combination of granularity and statistical significance become important. You want to keep drilling down, but you want it only to the point where the data is statistically significant, so that when you're making that decision, you have a high confidence that that's what it's going to be like in the future.
Great point. And, let's not forget, automation's coming along. A lot of companies are now using more, AI to read in and, decision trees to help, run things, including campaigns. But that example you gave right there is a perfect one for understanding why we need to have good people who can use their noggins to, say, all right, actually, we've gone too granular. Stop. You devote a chapter to the knowledge side of things. So, tell me how we can kind of have an unfair knowledge advantage.
Yeah, I think that any founder or CEO of a company will say our people are our most important asset. And I think they will believe that. But then oftentimes I've found that people are not very rigorous about actually making that an unfair advantage for them. And, we all know the similar expression to, if you think an expert's expensive, wait till you see what an amateur will cost you.
Right.
But what I found with a lot of marketing teams is they aren't very rigorous about making sure that their marketing team is truly world-beating experts. And so I generally think there's a couple ways to sort of ensure that you have a knowledge advantage. Number one is to be very rigorous in your hiring. And in the book, I talk about how I don't think the right way to hire people in marketing is just to look to see if they have a marketing certificate from a great university, or even that they worked at a company that you're impressed by, Google or Shopify or whatever. The example, what I like to see when I interview people is real world case studies that talk about the how and not the what. So someone who comes to me and says, I'm the world's greatest online marketer. Okay, give me a case study and show me how you did it, not what happened. And they say, okay, well, I bought these keywords and then I did this analysis and I did this and this and this, and then I optimized here and there. Someone like that is proving to me that they're an expert. Someone who says, oh yeah, I worked at Google and, I spent $10 million and we got $20 million of ROI. Okay, well, was that because of you, or is that because you worked at Google and everyone's going to click on your ad? So that's one example. I think the other part that's really important, and this is where I think a lot of marketing teams break down, is they're not constantly trying to quantify their knowledge advantage. So what I mean by that is, new CMO comes in and says, oh, I'm going to get rid of my marketing team. I'm going to hire a new marketing team. And
or I'm going to outsource versus insource.
Right, outsource versus insource. Whatever they do, there's no measurement to that process. So, we had a client a couple of years ago where we started working with them, and in 6 months we increased their annual revenue from online marketing by $50 million annualized. And after doing that, the CEO came to me and said, "We're bringing this in house." And I said, "Why?" "Well, we feel like we need a forcing function to learn online marketing." And my response to him was, I tell you what, if that's what you're going to do, bring it in house for 6 months, hire the best marketers you can, and then let us come back later and give us half the account and give them half the account, and let's see which one performs better. And if you're right that this was the right decision for you, you should stick with your in-house team. I'll walk away and applaud on the way out. If you're wrong, you're costing yourself $50 million a year. So that's an example where, the company is probably doing fine, but why would you take away a knowledge advantage worth $50 million and replace it without even doing any sort of audit or bake-off or setting up clear KPIs that would indicate that the new marketing team is going to be better than the agency? This is the kind of it's a combination of sort of confirmation bias from a psychology perspective, but also they just like empire building / I have a friend that I want to work with that.
Yeah, an old college friend. Yeah. I love how you say quantify it. And we can actually do that. I believe you can even do it when there is a vendor in the picture. You can talk about the frequency with which, the various points of contact talk with each other. You can kind of gauge whether or not they're, kind of at a low level, like, change bids, that kind of thing, or are they actually getting into the meaty strategy? And you can just tell from maybe transcripts of their calls that this is, a team that is clearly, firing on all cylinders and sharing ideas and getting very good results because they're actually thrashing through, the higher knowledge pieces of the business.
Yeah, and you can also you can hire another agency to do an audit and just to see what they find. And if you're really questioning whether the team is doing a good job, you can do a bake-off. You can say, you guys take this account, you guys take this account. Let's see who does it better. And it could be the case. I think in your example, it sounds like an agency that doesn't really know what they're doing if they're just doing sort of high level, updating reports. But it's possible that agency, for whatever reason, the lightweight methodology that they're using is better than the guys who come in and say, we have an artificial intelligence algorithm that will, do all this in your sleep. Let the data speak and be agnostic. If you want to have a knowledge advantage, you have to be agnostic. It can't be about who sends you better gifts or takes you to better dinners or who has a reporting dashboard. It's about the KPIs that you've established. Which side is exceeding those the most? Yeah, for sure. And it doesn't have to be binary. If we, step across the marketing spectrum from creative to, content and all these areas, I've seen companies that do a patchwork, some cases, we've got a person on board. Sometimes it's outside. You also make the distinction that, in this way that we can all make it up in our own way with our own recipe, you make the distinction between a product-led company and a marketing-led company. So kind of tell me how that fits in. Sure. So generally speaking, I break companies down to one of the two. A product-led company is a company that is really going to make or break their business based on the product that they produce. And a marketing-led company is one that's going to make or break based on the ability of the marketing team to execute. So, an example would be, if you are a sugar manufacturer and you're selling a commodity like sugar, there's nothing you can do to that sugar to make it better than everyone else's sugar. You are clearly a marketing-driven company. The same might be true for, a lot of like games, mobile games or something. You got to get the word out there. People aren't going to intuitively just know that your product is better. But if you're selling, some sort of enterprise security software where, you have to go through a litmus of different qualifications and bake-offs and analysis. You want to have marketing, but but the product is really good at what's going to define your success. So I often say when people are thinking about should I hire a marketing person in-house? Should I hire an agency? Something like that. I often say that the question I would ask you is, if you had one additional hire that you could make, only one, would you hire someone for your product team, which could include your engineering team, or would you hire someone for your marketing team? And if the answer is I'd hire someone for my marketing team, then most of your marketing should be in-house. If the answer is I'd hire someone for my product team, then you should think about at least a hybrid of some marketing in-house and some external. Yeah, that's a really good way to look at it. Let's swing back around to the money part. It is questionably something that, money is used to, keep score. Money is something that certainly, at least in digital businesses, there are companies that get huge network effects and, they tend to be, they just grow and keep growing in money. But
and you don't sugarcoat that. You actually, lay out a number of examples where companies can clobber their competition when they have a money advantage. After a litany of those, advantages that they have, you actually said, you may say at this point, you may be feeling a little sick to your stomach. By the way, I was, knowing that your brand competitors have a lot of unfair advantages. But then you kind of reassure us, and I think the reassuring part was you said, all right, it's going to be an uphill battle against, let's say, the incumbent in your space, but you're going to have a lot of unfair advantages, probably that they're not looking at. And if you take all those little ones and add them up, you're probably going to win that battle. Can you tell me a bit more about that?
You can buy your way into access to the best newspapers and journalists. That's all an advantage. The one thing that I like to say to companies that don't have sort of the established brand or sort of the backing behind them is, again, to sort of to find an advantage in that. And so there's a book that I read many years ago called I think it's called The 22 Immutable Laws of Branding. And one of the first rules that they have in that book is, if you can't be number one in a category, create a category you can be number one in. So are you going to be able to create the number one soda brand in the world and go against Coke? No. But can you create the number one organic fair trade soda in the world? Sure. And once you create the category, and now you're number one, and then you use that from a branding perspective to maybe attack the strength of the leader. So I'll give you an example. I'm gonna switch to another metaphor, but many years ago we had an email marketing client as a company, as a client, and their competitors were running these ads that said, "Get started with email marketing for just $10 a month." And our client was an enterprise level email marketing system. Their average monthly cost was, I think, $6,000 a month. And when we started working with them, they had these ads that said, new to email marketing, get our free guide. And I went to the company and I said, if you're new to email marketing, you're not going to spend $6,000 a month. You're going to spend $10 a month. You're going to spend money in the competition. So we need to create an unfair advantage, and because we can't compete on price. So we got to compete on something else. And by the way, these other companies had better brands, very established companies you would have heard of, like Constant Contact and whatnot. So what we did is we said, we're going to create a brand niche around enterprise marketing. And so we ran some ads that said, serious about email marketing, you deserve better than a $10 solution, which immediately put the lead companies with the big deep pockets and the brand on their heels. Because what we were basically saying was, if you want a cheapo product, you get what you pay for. Sure, go for the $10 a month one. But if you're a serious email marketer and you're willing to spend $6,000 a month, you should go with ours. And it actually worked so well that the competition took their pricing out of the ads, because it suddenly became a negative. So
right. But there's proof positive that the competitors noticed.
Exactly. So there's plenty of ways to attack a brand or to attack someone with deeper pockets than you are. And you just have to sort of think about, like, what can I do given that I'm not going to be able to outspend them, or given that I don't have the brand reputation, what are the advantages that I do have?
Yeah. And again, getting back to the David and Goliath, to me, the parallel between, all right, so you're David and, this huge guy is walking towards you with a sword. All right, well, don't try to get out your own sword. Like, use something different. Get a sling and some stones. The fact that he's lumbering there, you can kind of aim at him, and, that's where your advantage is going to be. Don't try to meet fire with fire.
Right. Correct. That's exactly right.
One of the last ones that you mentioned in the book is access. So, and you tell a little bit of your own story when you get to that point. We're recording this in 2021. Many people are used to being remote, but you say that, the people that and let's imagine that it's a blend of physical and virtual, that counts for something, right? So tell me a bit about how the access advantage can really be unfair.
Yeah, in the book, I talk about how just being in Silicon Valley, I was able to just network my way into really influential venture capitalists and thought leaders, and those people just sent me a lot of business because they knew me. I was local. They knew I could, if they had a problem, they could call me up for lunch and I'd come and solve it in person. But I think that what's amazing to me is a lot of people think, well, I'm not some famous celebrity. I don't know any celebrities. I don't have any access, but everyone does have access, really. I mean, in my case, one of the things that I have a lot of access to is, for example, people at Google. I've been working at Google for 20 years, and I know people literally who have been there for 20 years. And so when I have a client for my agency, and sometimes, clients do stupid things. And, I gave an example in the book of a client we had that was a gun and hunting company, and they made a mistake of running an ad that was against Google's guidelines for ammunition and guns. And Google sent them an email that said, "You're blacklisted for life. You will never, ever run ads on Google again." And they came to me and said, "Can you help?" This was before they were a client. And I said, "I think I can help." So I went to Google and I said, "Look, you guys know me. I'm a straight shooter." No pun intended, I guess, in the case of this. And I said, "Look, if you let these guys back on, we're going to personally make sure, my team, that they never do this again. It was an innocent mistake. We'll let them back on and give them a chance." And they did. This company spends $10 million a year with Google now, and profitably. And so that's an example where it's like, I don't have connections to Jay-Z. I just have connections to some people who happened to have been in Google for a long time. And that access was the difference between this company, literally competing against some of the biggest brands in outdoors and hunting, or just probably folding. That's one example where, again, it's like, it doesn't have to be celebrities that we're talking about. It can just be, who do you know right now, and how is that going to give you an unfair advantage for your business?
Yeah, great point. And the word reputation is never far from that. I think access, the people who are willing to let their reputation rub off on you also want to see that you are competent, right? But then it goes two ways. It's immediately reciprocated, and you say, "Well, yeah, I will, hold my reputation out for you. I will make an introduction. I will, find out something for you." So that access, as you build it, can be. And I guess the last one, and this is, I think, where people, if they think of A-listers, they get intimidated by it. But it doesn't have to be necessarily that you have access and are kind of the A-list of the world. You can define your world in a much smaller way than the world, right? So your access, even if you're in some, backwater place, you have access to the people around you.
Totally. Well, and I think to your point, I mean, I like to write. I like to write in general about marketing. And so back in 2004, I looked around and I looked at all the different search engine marketing blogs that were out there. And I said, frankly, a lot of these are not very good. A lot of them, really, all they were doing was every time Google updated their logo, they would write a story saying, "Google has updated their logo for Valentine's Day." And I'm thinking, this is not, why did you even spend your time writing this? So I said, you know what? I think that this is a little small community. It was even smaller then. I guess it's pretty large now. I said, I think I can be one of the most influential writers about search engine marketing by just writing for maybe a more advanced crowd. So I just started out, and I had, a couple hundred readers on my blog, but I got to the point where I got enough of a reputation to get into a bigger journal. It was, Media Post. And then from there, I got into Marketing Land. And then someone introduced me to Huffington Post. And then I got into Speaker Circuit. And then it just all rolled downhill. And it wasn't because I started out by saying I have to be in the New York Times. It was, I'm in a little small community, and I think I could build a little niche here. And then from there, I just kept using that access to get me to better and better access.
Yeah, it can't be said often enough. When you start off in a small way like that, but you do it consistently, the phrase that you might hear later from someone who picks you, to be that speaker at that conference or whatever is, "Well, I see you everywhere." And that makes me laugh because it's all perception. Did you happen to be in the right places and leverage your advantage so that they would get that impression? Absolutely. Is that wrong? No, it's completely legit on how you do it. It just takes some thinking up front of how you're going to allow for that eventual situation to happen.
Yeah, I've had situations where the combination of the thought leadership, writing these articles, and my connections to Silicon Valley have led to these sort of almost strange situations where someone will call up my agency and say, I talked to so-and-so and he said you were the best agency and I want to hire you. And I'm thinking, like, this person who referred them to me has never worked with my agency. They just read my blog or they met me at a conference or something. But nonetheless, that drove business. And I happen to think, yes, we are the best agency. So it was smart of him to hire us. But I was surprised at how many times I would get a referral from someone who actually had never worked with me or sometimes never even met me.
Sure. And, they may be the one who puts that halo on your head. You have to keep it there.
Absolutely. I think that the one thing I tell people in Silicon Valley is I say Silicon Valley is a small valley and your reputation is everything. So all of these advantages we talk about in the book, I mean, if we're talking about a service business, if we're talking about like access advantage or, even knowledge advantage in terms of hiring great people, you have to back it up. I mean, you can sort of con your way through a couple of relationships, but at some point, if you're not backing up your reputation, your access advantage with the right results, you'll fail, and there's no unfair advantage that's going to help you there.
Well put. When you wrap up the book, you kind of bring us back to what you meant by the very name you gave the book, and you just leave the line "life is unfair" hanging out there. I had always thought of it as meaning, one thing, and it would be the kind of thing you console your kids with. I think you tell a story, in fact, about where you had to console one of your kids and saying that, but then you flip it into the other one. So tell us more about what made you pick that phrase.
Yeah. Well, another way of saying it is you don't get what you deserve, you get what you negotiate. And I think that there are many people in the world who are spend a lot of time complaining about how so-and-so, got something that they didn't deserve because they were the son of someone important, or because, they are schmoozing better than me, or they got lucky. And I just think that's kind of a waste of time. And I think that the only way to really sort of recognize that there's unfairness in life is to say, well, I'm going to create my own unfair advantages instead of complaining about other people who have some unfair advantage. And ultimately, you're going to come up in situations where, yes, you were applying for a job and you were the most qualified person and someone got the job because their father called in a favor or whatever. But that's life. And there's no way there's no time to sort of stop and complain about it and say this is unfair. The way to deal with life is to say, okay, well, that happened. I'm going to move on. And the next time I'm going to use some unfair advantage to put me in a situation where I'm the person who's getting something that maybe I shouldn't have gotten.
Or that you stuck it out while others didn't. The people listening here are all, in the free enterprise system. And, I doubt that any of them has found sour grapes as a winning strategy for how to come back from losing a deal or, a flopped campaign. So, I agree with you. Would you say also that because we're in a competitive system, that's actually what ends up making the best output possible for a client, or in your case that you're in-house, your own brand?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I think it's not a perfectly efficient system. So we humans make mistakes and we make errors. But at the end of the day, I think generally speaking, if you're constantly trying to up your game and constantly trying to find whatever advantage you can, over time, you will start to see that the scales tip in your favor because it's a mostly efficient system. It's
just like sports, and you highlighted that, right? The best team isn't the team that or the team that wins the game isn't the one that actually does a perfect game. The team that wins is the one that, when there were opportunities, other missteps, they simply caught on and took it to their advantage.
Look at Moneyball, the game about the Oakland A's. They had a tenth of the budget of the Yankees, and they said we don't have a money advantage. We're not going to win. What are we going to do? Let's create a data advantage. Let's go out and mine the data, and we will spend we'll spend our budget on all these superstars that no one can recognize except for us. They could have just sulked and said, we're never going to beat the Yankees, but they didn't.
Yeah, for sure. That might be the one thing that you would encourage people as a takeaway, is to actually just sit and think and maybe whiteboard for a little bit on which of the 5 that you give they should exploit in their competitive world, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think that's a good exercise. I mean, go through the book and say, where do we really have a chance to differentiate ourselves? I mean, maybe we don't have that much data, but we have, the absolute smartest marketing team when it comes to whatever SaaS, fintech software, and we're going to be able to sort of run circles around the competition because we have experts that they just don't. Whatever it is, I think that is the right approach. You don't have to sort of do all 5 of the advantages at once. Pick the one that's going to give you the best chance for success, and then move on from there.
That's right. And there's got to be one in that 5 that'll work for you.
Absolutely.
Where can people find out more about the book and about you, David?
So my agency website is 3qdigital.com. We do have a landing page where, for a limited time, you can get a copy of the book for free. I don't know if you need it, what sort of qualifications go into it, but I'll just give the link. It's 3qdigital.com/unfair-marketing. And if you go there, you fill out your contact us form, we'll ship you either a PDF or a paperback version.
That's awesome. I'll include the links to the show note there, and you're reachable on social media, and I'll include those links as well. Oh, that's great. Thank you so much for joining me today, David. And for the listeners here, I hope you got a lot out of this. If you want to share this episode with somebody or email them a link, go ahead and do that. We'll have all of the things that David talked about in the show notes. If you have any other suggestions on who we should include as a future author for this, please share that as well.
Thanks for listening. Follow the show on Twitter @Funnel Reboot. If you like what you have heard today, please consider leaving a review wherever you get your podcasts.